Okay.
At least I remember what my name is, right?
Yeah, right. All right, go ahead.
So my name's Marshall Weber, and I'm from Brooklyn, and spent a lot of time at Occupy Wall Street. I'm on my way to the university as I'm an artist, and I do some work for the Special Collections Library there. So I was here earlier in the year for the occupation of the state capitol in Madison. I got family in Madison, and was taking photographs there, and just took some photographs here. Been taking photographs at Occupy Wall Street, and I think the thing that really impressed me is when I came out to Madison earlier in the year, I flew out with a bunch of union guys. They were actually sheet metal worker union guys, and they were coming to the Capitol occupation. And then when I went back to New York to participate in Occupy Wall Street, I really realized that the Madison occupation of the Capitol had a big influence on how people were strategizing Occupy Wall Street. And I think behind the scenes there, Wisconsin had a big influence on kind of the attitude and kind of the positive attitude, polite, low-key, kind of a different kind of protest strategy.
Wow.
And it's obviously worked, and traveling around the country, just seeing all the different occupations, just realizing how important it is for people from all over to talk about this stuff. I do a lot of work with Iraq veterans against the war. A lot of them are really heavily involved with the occupations, and you know that, hero Scott Olson got wounded really severely by the Oakland police, targeted and shot with a tear gas canister after serving 2 tours of duty in Iraq.
Yeah.
So there's some serious issues.
It inspired a lot of solidarity and support here in Milwaukee and in other areas of Wisconsin to stand in solidarity with Scott Olson and with Occupy Oakland. I mean, it's right on our sign out front, because we're really trying to bring people together that, believe in this movement and what the potential is here.
It's important issues. There's a big healthcare crisis in the military right now, and there's obviously a lot of financial issues with the military and military strategy and defense contractors. That all kind of ties in with the things that people are talking about with the occupations around the country.
Yeah, the idea of how our tax base is being utilized is a big issue that keeps coming back up, with people that have been activists for many, many years, that, that here's a central problem that to how the system works, that, is beginning, focused, but not as enough focus, maybe, in a lot of situations, that, the tax distribution issue, it's huge.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to me about the Occupy movement is it's not really politically based. Like, I've met people at Occupy Wall Street who I don't agree with their politics at all. But the dialogue and the fact that everyone in the country, it doesn't matter what your politics are, it's kind of like we've got a business here called the United States of America, and we're not running it right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, whether you're, libertarian, or whether you're neoconservative. You got to get the business right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this movement represents. It actually represents American people coming together, not dividing up into red and blue and all that, quite frankly, BS that the media and the pundits are throwing at us. It's coming together and talking about how to solve the problems that corporations and people entrenched in the bureaucracy of the government just don't seem to know how to solve.
Well, okay, let me ask you this, though. When you say that we're not getting the business right, it's sort of, it promulgates the concept of government or of a nation as enterprise, which is lends itself to being profit-driven. So if we're going to restructure the idea of our country as a business, then what does that mean? Because there will be a lot of argument against supporting the idea of government as enterprise, or supporting, the idea of a country that exists to make a profit. Is that the point? That's not really, how do you restructure it? How do you reapproach that then?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a model in terms of, the reality is, this country is a big business, and the reality is we live in a world where nations organize as businesses, and it's it's all about the exchange of money, and there's nothing really wrong with that from my point of view. The problem is not capitalism or socialism or communism. Um, I don't care what it is if it works and it's fair and it's just. This is the problem with labels. You can label a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it right. And so I think that the issue is what would work better. And the reality is, yeah, money is involved, right? I mean, it's not. What's important about our country is our culture. Okay, the people. I have no doubt about that. I don't think any American would disagree with me there.
Right.
That's working. Americans are the funniest people. We're creative. We do all kinds of great stuff. For sure.
We're winning the cultural war on coolness.
Yeah, the cultural war. Yeah, definitely way ahead in a lot
coolest,
of different ways.
Right.
But, my sister lives in Connecticut. It's the richest state in the United States. They had a snowstorm last week. Her power went out. The power company wouldn't come fix her line. She's a middle-class woman paying taxes. I mean, we're not talking poverty here. We're talking pretty well off. She didn't have power for 8 days.
Yeah.
Now, that's not right. Last time I was in Minneapolis last year, the freaking bridge collapsed.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is not a poor city. This isn't really necessarily just about wealth and poverty. It's about things not being done right.
Well, that was, there was a lot of politics involved in that deal and who they chose as contractors and stuff, and corners were cut and people knew it but didn't do anything about it, Certain engineers were keeping their mouth shut and stuff like this because of where the bottom line was on the project. And it didn't get the attention it deserved until a school bus full of middle school kids went down with the, oh my.
But
see,
that's
that's the level of incipence of the corruption that drives everything towards profit.
Right, and the problem with those who are making money off the corruption is that the American people are not that stupid. And once they organize and get together, things will change. Because you know what? The short-term thing there with that bridge and that corruption and all that money, any money anybody would have made off of that project, that was wiped out. It was millions and millions of dollars when that bridge went down. Millions of dollars of business, millions of dollars of liability. It's just not, the word I like to use is sustainable. I mean, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, economic
with the
sustainability.
environment and with the amount of poverty in we're one of the richest countries in the world. Kids don't have health insurance.
Right.
Kids don't have 3 meals a day.
Right.
It's just, it just can't go on. It's got to change.
I think, so what I'm hearing here, and I agree with this a lot, is that whatever the state of enterprise of the United States, that form should follow function. And that the function is to truly care for the well-being of the people so that we have a country.
Exactly.
So that we have a sustainable agriculture, economy, housing situation. Hey, let's look at this objectively. We're all human beings, right? We're all living beings. And the goal of the genome is indefinite self-perpetuation.
Exactly.
And if we're not working towards sustainability, we're working towards something else. Other than indefinite self-perpetuation. And it's like, I think this is like, in my opinion, the really basic point people are starting to wake up to is that this system is completely broken. It's not fulfilling the needs of life.
Exactly.
So,
for all species, really. I mean, we're just one of them. What I've really enjoyed about it, though, in terms of talking to people and getting around the country, is that we've got the answers. A lot of people, when Occupy Wall Street first started, people kept on going, oh, what is it about? What is it about? What's the issue here? What's the issue here?
Yeah.
And I thought at the beginning the issue was, we need to start asking the right questions. The answers we have, we got to ask the right questions. We got to, I think that it's going to be a long struggle still, continuing into this winter of our discontent. We're going to see what happens through the rest of the winter.
Nice.
But the world is definitely changing. The global communications, cell phones, WikiLeaks, YouTube, all that stuff. The information is there. People know. I think it's going to be a more transparent society. It's got to be more fair. And we got to get going because the environment is falling apart around us. Our infrastructure is falling around. There's a sense of urgency that I'm feeling.
And do you think, I mean, if I could ask a leading question here, because there's like, a lot of theories about why this is happening now, and I sort of think about it as, this is the first generation in which we've really had the chance to look in total at the picture of the world and see all the information in a scope that allows the human mind to form a pattern around it. Do you think that that has something to do with it, as far as like the global interconnectedness of information? And
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
I mean, one thing I noticed, if you looked at the Arab Spring thing, right? About 2 years ago, a bunch of YouTube videos started circulating about these Saudi Arabian and Qatari and Dubai and sheiks and princes beating their help up, and there was one really horrible case where some Saudi Arabian prince killed his chauffeur in the desert. They're actually doing phone videos of it, and that went kind of viral.
Wow.
And it really pissed a lot of people off.
Yeah.
And about a year after that, the WikiLeaks came out, and that had in the WikiLeaks, there was about a few thousand of the WikiLeaks were U.S. diplomats talking about how corrupt the Arab leaders were, and how much they disliked them, they were dishonest, and how they were they inherited their positions, they were, really greedy, uneducated kind of morons who were billionaires and never worked a day in their life, but were like, leading the, in charge of all contracting in Qatar, or like in charge of the defense department of Saudi Arabia. And those WikiLeaks went throughout the whole Middle East, and it kind of flipped a lot of people out. And then the whole cell thing happened, and then, Tunisia, game over with that guy Bouzizi. So it's like, all of a sudden, all these people had never had access to information because they lived in these dictatorships. Libya, Yemen, all these places. Had a cell phone, had access to the internet, we're looking at WikiLeaks, we're looking at YouTube, we're talking to each other. We're getting pissed off because the guy in Tunisia, I mean, he was a fruit vendor, that guy Bouzizi. And he couldn't afford to go to school because he had two sisters. He had some sisters, and they couldn't work. He couldn't afford to go to school. So he was actually a fruit vendor, so he could pay for his sister to go to school.
Wow.
And on like a half a dozen occasions, the police, there was all this corruption, he couldn't afford to pay, for the scales, and they smashed his fruit stand up again and again. And finally he just burned himself to death.
Lit himself on fire.
Yeah.
And that's how...
But the thing was that the inequity was apparent. Like, everyone knew, and the phones, and people were sharing these stories, and people were seeing how, for the first time they were saying, wow, this guy has gold-plated faucets in his bathroom, and I can't afford to send my kids to school.
Well, and just to bring it back around to where the conversation started, of course everyone knows that what happened with this gentleman was, and what followed in Tahrir Square, was a huge inspiration to think of like what could be possible in terms of a mobilization of mass protest and dissent, and really standing up for basic values of society, which inspired in a lot of ways the takeover of the Rotunda, that this was an echo, and then our voice in Wisconsin was then heard all over the world, and there were simultaneous protests in every capital, in all 50 states, and it just keeps, the voice just keeps echoing back and forth across the world.
And it's pretty interrelated, right? It's no mistake that, these oil countries are the ones that are undergoing these revolts now. Where's all the oil going to? It's about trade.
Maybe it's
about
that country that's only 25% of the world's population and is using 80% of all the fossil fuel resources. Maybe it's them. Maybe
well, I have to say,
us.
I feel the same thing about what's going on in Mexico with the narcotraficantes. You get all those middle-class Americans and those rich Americans to stop snorting cocaine, and there are no narcotraficantes.
Right.
And quite frankly, that's a healthcare issue. That's a mental healthcare issue. The thing that I have to say, I travel all over the country. I spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C., and you know what? Who's snorting all that cocaine? A bunch of rich Republicans. A bunch of like rich Democrats.
I
And then
understand.
these are the same people who are pouring money into the border, pouring money to the cops. But
Yeah.
if they all stopped snorting cocaine, it would not happen. Why are they snorting cocaine? Because they're unhappy. Why are they
Yeah.
unhappy? Because they're participating in a system that's probably against their religious beliefs, probably against their ethical beliefs. They feel guilty, they're frustrated, they're not happy,
Yeah.
and it's just perpetuating the system.
Well, but
Get
you know,
right.
this is something that, and this touches on something that people on both sides of the argument that are both in favor of the Occupy movement and against the Occupy movement talk about equally, and it's just the rational point of, well, what do you do then? Because, you know, I mean, I think one of the mistakes that we see repeated throughout history with every revolution is that we approach the idea of tearing something down without planning and contemplating what to replace it with once it's down, and which then leaves itself open to another form of tyranny or total chaos or whatever, you know. So you know, the attention and focus, I think we have an opportunity to do something differently here, to
I
really
agree.
plan for what we want to come next.
Yeah, I
And
think a lot of people talk about, oh, what are they going to do? What's going to, like, this is not going to be
yeah,
a
it's
hurry.
a culture
This
of
is not gonna be a
convenience.
rush.
It's
Yeah.
a culture of convenience that a lot of people are afraid to let go of, and or don't know how to let go of. You know, and how do you respond to that? You know, it's
Yeah.
like I'm asking rhetorically,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
how do you respond to the fact that we really do have a culture of convenience, and it just so happens that it's supported by oppression and suffering, and you know, a culture of scarcity that, you know, grips the entire world and creates inequity. But what do you do to relieve people of their convenience without
Right. Well, you know, it's
without mass
interesting.
revolt against that?
I think one reason
You
why
know?
Occupy works is because
Mm.
it's very symbolic, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you guys being out here in the cold in your tents, the people in New York being out in the cold in your tents, you know, the people in Syria being out and getting shot every day out
Mhm.
there. I mean, what it says to people everywhere is that, you know what? Maybe the convenience isn't as great as it's cracked up to be.
Mm.
Like, these people are standing for their rights, you know, whether, you know, it just, I don't know, I hate to be patriotic about it, but, you know, during the colonial war, those guys were walking around with leather straps tied around their feet because they couldn't afford boots,
Yeah.
and they were an inspiration to everybody in the whole country, because if you see someone who believes in something enough to be out here, and, you know, as you know, it's not convenient to live in a tent in the middle of the open. I mean,
Yeah, it's not.
But you set such a big example to say, you know what, maybe these people are actually happier because they're doing something for the whole country. They're not out there for themselves. They're not out there because it's convenient. They're out there for the whole country. They're out there for the kids. They're out there for all the species that are going extinct. They're out there for, you know, the flowers and the trees and the
Yeah.
wheat and the corn and the whole country. And to me, that's really inspiring. It's like, at Occupy Wall Street, you got a lot of people who are coming every day to talk or to do presentations, or, you know, there's all kinds of stuff happening. And then you got the hardcore people who are there every night sleeping, and they're kind of setting this example about, you know what, maybe we've had it too cushy, and if we get too soft, we're going to lose everything we have. And this, I think, is the thing about the convenient society. Maybe it's not actually that convenient. You know, maybe in the long run, it's really inconvenient.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I don't know, I feel like Occupy is part of a cultural movement that we're going towards a tipping point. We're going towards a place where how we live is really going to change radically. Where it's not going to be possible to, like, be a billionaire. It's just not going to be a possibility. You wouldn't want to do it. Like, this whole idea of having separate cultures in a society, that's going to be over, and it's just not that much fun anyways, obviously. Like, why are all these rich people
Creates
on
all kinds of
drugs
fun.
and drinking and all that?
Yeah.
You know,
All the hypocrisy
it's the
and
happiness
all that.
quotient we're really
Yeah.
looking at here. We
Yeah.
think we've been sold one package
Mhm.
because we think it works, we think it's convenient, but it's going to change because we have better ideas. To me, that's the whole thing. It's like, what is this revolution about? We have better ideas for a more just, for a more equitable, for a healthier, for a more sustainable country.
Yeah. Yeah.
and world. Ultimately, that's the big issue, I think, because
Wow.
everything we do now affects everything that goes on in the rest of the world. The world is so small. Come on, what are they saying? They were saying we're getting up to like
We're over 7 billion now.
7
And
billion
the
people.
planetary max for self-sustainment under the current system of resource distribution is only 9 billion. And with the boom population right now of 13 to 16-year-olds, we can push that boundary and blow it up within 5 years from now. In fact, the population could actually double within 10 years. So yeah, the situation is critical and we really have to figure some things out. Thanks so much for coming by to talk to us, and hey, Occupy!
Occupy, yeah, onward.